Okay, you've probably been playing around in n8n like a lot, and you now understand that the nodes are the actual like methods of integrating anything. If you want to integrate any service, any app, you know that you're probably going to be doing it in a node. If you want to transform any data that's coming through, you know you're going to be doing it in a node. This time we're going to be looking at core nodes in n8n, how to think about them, what are all the tools, the types of tools that will give you the advantage when you're trying to build workflows. By the way, for context, the name is Muzi. I am the Grand Alchemist of the Guild. If you know, you know. I'm not going to say anything about that. Like, if you know, you know. But what I will say is that my mission is to help 1,000 people learn AI and automation and then make their first $1,000 in this online space that is growing and growing, and it's totally, absolutely about to fucking explode. So, no more talking from me. Let's just go. Um, so the core nodes are the engines for any change you want to see in your workflows, right? If you want, I always try to relate things in terms of sort of like real world use cases. Say hypothetically you have a database of leads that you just scraped from YouTube. You want to transform that data into make it more useful. So you want to qualify those leads. You're going to drag them into the workflow, and then you're going to evaluate them. So maybe you might check out their recent videos that they release. If the videos are recent, right, depending on the difference between the current date and the date at which they got released, you look at that difference and then you'll score those people based on that, and also based on the number of subscribers they have, the number of comments they get per average, like on average per video, and so on and so forth. And then you'll use all of that information to come up with a real way of like scoring them relative to other leads. So that's just like all of that is something that happens in a workflow. All of that is things you're going to be doing with certain action nodes inside your workflow. We covered action nodes in a previous video, go check that out. But yeah, core nodes basically can be action nodes. They can do actions, they can be triggers, they can do anything. Core nodes are basically anything that comes pre-installed with n8n, right? These are pre-installed tools that handle data, that transform your data, that do logic, that do time control. And as I said, because they come with n8n, they're stable and reliable, they are well maintained, and they're perfect for beginners who want to just get started. And this is also the reason why, like, because they're reliable, they're also very easy for scalability and growth. Let's just run through like a few examples of these. The first types are integration communication. So these are the ones that you're going to be using to communicate with services. The most famous, or I guess the most useful one, is the HTTP request. Why? Because we're in n8n, so n8n has the least number of integrations, like across the board, when it comes to like other workflow apps. Like, because I know the other ones, so the big ones, the famous ones like Make and Zapier, they're in the thousands, but n8n is only in the hundreds. So that's why the HTTP request is going to be so useful. You can make API calls for universal connectivity, very useful. There's also the webhook node where you can listen for external data, and then whenever you cache that data, you can start workflows from that. So yeah, you listen for external events, and we've covered trigger nodes before, but yeah, this is basically just the webhook node is another trigger node. Webhook nodes also come in a different variation where you can send the response back to the webhook itself. This is useful if, say, hypothetically, someone does something and then you're waiting for a response from a workflow, um, and then based on that response, you can send the user. So on the front end, like a user gets some kind of message based on maybe whatever information that they put into the form, or whatever, like however they were interacting with the system. So email nodes, you basically can send emails, you can receive emails, um, you can manage your triggers for your inbox, you can send automated messages, and this is very useful for speed to lead purposes, right? Whenever someone signs up, what you want to do is you want to send them a message as quickly as possible, telling them that you understand that they signed up, and you just want to tell them that you'll get back to them as soon as you possibly can. And this is actually something that is proven, like, to increase the chances of conversion by over 300%, if I'm not mistaken. So that it 3x's your chances, which is something very, very useful. If you had people doing this like all the time, it wouldn't work. One thing, because people are slow and they tend to make mistakes. Um, workflows are not slow at all. And even if there are mistakes, they're always like negligent mistakes because it's always within the bounds of logic. So, yeah, you bridge external apps with seamless data exchange mechanisms, and you enable like some real-time automation. So let's look at these examples right here and like how they actually look, so that you don't get lost. In case this is like the first time that you think about this. So these are the integration and communication nodes. Right, we have the HTTP request one. Right, there's obviously different types of methods, and again, you have to learn REST. So the REST framework, there's like get methods, post methods, patch methods, so on and so forth. And then whatever URL you're trying to send this to, whatever, like if you need authentication, then you could do that. If you're connecting to services, you probably need authentication, right? You need maybe like an API token or something like that. Um, I may go through like certain kind of like I may go through nodes in the future, sort of like a lot of useful nodes and how to set them up. So like just get like you know look forward to that. So yeah, there's when you're sending an HTTP request, there's something called a query parameter, header parameter, and a body. So a query parameter is this sort of what you see here. These are all query parameters to an extent. So say hypothetically, if you were sending a message to the n8n itself, okay, this is a self-hosted instance of n8n here. But if I was sending an HTTP request, I would probably be sending it to this endpoint that is workflow, and then I would have a query parameter that would be something like this. Right. Query parameters normally have like some parameter and then equals and then something like the value that you want. So I could just show you. Um, you could be saying like heart, and then you could be saying something like snippet here. And yeah, so how it's represented in a web page, like how when you're sending a request, it would be question mark, so that would represent that it's a query, and then it would be something like part equals snippet. So that's how it's represented, but you can do this here like through a user interface, which makes it very simple to understand. Um, so yeah, I'm not going to activate this. I just wanted to show you that you have a method, you have a URL, you have authentication if you need it, and then a bunch of query parameters, bunch of header parameters as well, body parameters, and other options too, because like these are all things that you need to sort of think about. So batching would be if you're sending like large amounts of data and you want to batch your data. SSL is sort of like security issues. If you're sending information to, if you're sending a request to a service that might be insecure, then you can just ignore SSL issues. And again, these are redirects, response, like how to deal with if you get redirected, how to deal with the response that's coming back, whether or not your HTTP request should time out depending on whatever um, sort of you're doing. So like you could be generating an image, but it just takes too long. So just time out the request if it takes too long, and then just keep going with the workflow. Maybe tell it that it errored or something. Just like have error handling mechanisms for that. This is the webhook. And how webhooks work is that you have some kind of webhook URL here, and then you send whenever you're sending a message, you can set up the webhook URL sort of to activate whenever someone does something out there in the internet. So they could click a button. That button could have a sort of setting inside the button, um, telling it to activate to send the data to a webhook, and then whenever that data gets sent, it'll get caught by this because like you could have this listening for a test event. But this is only listening for test event since it's not using the production URL. So again, everything gets handled by the REST sort of framework. You have methods, you have URL paths, you have authentication, and we have response types. Right, and of course you have other options here. And then there's other types. So it's like this is a simple integration with Twilio. Twilio is useful for sending messages either by SMS or by WhatsApp. You can also do calls with Twilio, which is like really really powerful, like the more you think about it. So imagine having to call a lead. So someone signs up on your website and they leave their number there, right? You call them immediately through an 11 labs sort of system kind of. And what you do is you effectively sort of set the system up so that when you call them, you um, you tell them that they could have maybe you call them, right, and then you tell them, hey, we understand that you just signed up on the website. Thank you for signing up. And is there any other question? So you could set up a chatbot that handles those kinds of communications. When the user is speaking on the phone, what's happening in the back end is that it's transcribing whatever the user is saying. It is then sending that information to an agent or a model, whatever. The model comes up with a response. You send that response over to a sound generation sort of like platform, and then you send that out back to the person, back to the call, and that keeps happening again and again, just like to generate really good responses every single time. Really powerful, as I just said. So yeah, the next one to look at is the Gmail. This is how the Twitter looks like, by the way. So you can send messages or calls to different sort of like types of people, and you can even send it to WhatsApp, which is really powerful, very useful. Um, then there's also the Gmail sending message kind of um, is very easy with Gmail. Gmail has a good integration, and again, for these types, you need an integration. You need to connect to some kind of app or service. We'll go through how to set those up, like maybe in a future time. But yeah, this is just how these kinds of like they look, right? The ones I spoke about. Let's keep going. So data manipulation is basically taking whatever data is coming in and then doing something with the data, right? We've spoken about this before in a previous module. If you're interested in seeing that, just check out my channel or check out the playlist that this is on. Um, it's very useful to understand like data manipulation is everything in n8n. It's useful for lead qualification, useful for lead nurturing as well. You don't, because you're constantly playing around with data, right? You're constantly passing data from one node to another. um, those are like what complex integrations, that's all it's dealing with. So you want to be able to manipulate data effectively. Let's just look at some nodes that actually help with this. So the set node is useful for restructuring or renaming data fields. The code node is useful for adding custom logic with JavaScript. And I love the code node. I even call it the code node because that's just how powerful it is. The merge node is useful for combining data branches with for creating like richer workflows. And there's also the split in batches node, which processes large data sets in manageable chunks. Um, let's just look at those. So these are the ones, right? As I said, it normally has the name edit fields, but it allows you to take information and then rename it or create information and pass it. Very useful for data mocking, very useful for controlling information that's flowing at any moment in time. The code node is very useful. Again, you can do literally, you can replace almost every other node in n8n with the code node. This is a fact, and I think it's a fact that I can and probably will prove one day because I just love the code node. The merge node, it merges multiple inputs together, right? You can choose the number of inputs you want to merge. There's also different kinds of merge operations. We've spoken about it before. Again, go check those videos out. It was in the data section, probably data flow. Go check that out. But yeah, it merges multiple inputs together and then comes out with an output. So it's very useful for controlling what information the next nodes actually see or get access to. And then there's also the split out. So you map some input field, and then you split out the contents of that input field, which is probably an array or something. And it will come out with like different sets of items out here, which is very, very useful again. Let's keep going. So Next is the logic node. So you have the if node, which allows you to choose a path based on true or false logic. You have the switch node, which handles multiple conditions with precision. Um, this is how they look. So the if node is a node you're probably going to see a lot, and this is because it allows you to build smarter workflows where you don't have to make decisions on like how data is flowing. Right? You can evaluate conditions as true or false. If it's true, it flows here. If it's false, it flows here. And the nice thing is that both lines can flow at the same time. You just all you have to do is just merge the lines later on, thus having like a richer sort of flow of information. Um, very useful. Here's the switch node, right? This is a switch node with one sort of output, but again, you can create different routes. So you evaluate some condition, and then if it's that definite condition, it'll come out of there. But if it's another condition, it'll come out of here. It's another condition, it'll come out of here. And by the end of it, you have three routes, which is like really, really useful. So time control nodes are useful because timing is everything. You don't want to send a message to someone while they're sleeping. You don't want to access a server while it's super busy. You want to send information or receive information. You want to schedule things. Timing is everything, and n8n does this very simply with the chron node and the wait node. Again, we've covered these. I just wanted to show them again. So the chron node is the schedule trigger. Basically, you can schedule any action based on some time. You have a trigger interval where you can say it's days or minutes or hours. You have the days in between triggers, but of course this changes based on whatever trigger interval you set. And then you can trigger it at a certain time, and then you can trigger it. Yeah, like very useful. And again, the settings here, like you can set up a note that specifies what this sort of node does, and then you can display the node in the flow, which is very useful for cases where you want to have real documentation. Like if you're not the only one who's working on a workflow, which happens very often, like more often than you might think. So let's check out the data manipulation, right? Data manipulation, like the data source nodes. So the data source nodes are very useful if you have some kind of data source that you're accessing and you just want to grab that data and then you do things with it. So you get like Google Sheets, you get Airtable, you get RSS feeds, and database nodes. If you don't know what an RSS feed is, it is a feed for like web pages. So it's literally just live content from blogs or news feeds. It's very, very powerful. An application I could think of like already on the top of my mind is taking a recently released blog article, um, turning it into a script for a video, and then generating an AI avatar video just to post content like relevant recent content that performs very very well because of its relevance. And yeah, you can do this easily with automation. There's also some database nodes, so like you can query and sync backend data directly. And let's just check out like a few of them. So here's the Google Sheets node. We've covered this like way too many times. But yeah, this is going to need a credential to access. We'll check out credentials at some other time. This is an RSS feed node. So what it does is it just grabs data from an RSS feed. And you can ignore SSL issues again, but yeah, very useful for grabbing sort of rich content. And this is an Airtable node, so it allows you to connect to Airtable at some table base for some record. Depending on what operation you're doing here, you could be creating a record in a base. You could be creating a whole base, which is like insane when you think about it. But yes, you could absolutely do things like that. And then there's Superbase as well. Um, you could be getting different types of sort of you could connect to Superbase and then do things in the Superbase, um, sort of uh, just the base itself, I guess. So bases they have different tables that you could sort of access the information inside the table, um, and you do this very easily in n8n, right? Because it has the integration for Superbase. This isn't the only integration for Supabase, by the way. There's also the Supabase vector store integration, which is very useful if you are trying to do things with agents. So there's also the AI automation nodes, right? Like the OpenAI is like very famous, right? You can prompt an LLM, you can send a message to an LLM, you could generate smart content, you can analyze data, you can automate responses, right? Very, very powerful. All of it is just about bringing AI enhanced efficiency to workflows. So let's wrap up. So core nodes are pre-installed tools that handle the most incredible functionalities in n8n, and they could be all sorts of types, but the ones we covered today are integration, communication, data manipulation, logic, time control, data source, and AI and automation. I know you're ready to dive deeper. I know I am. So next time we're looking at action nodes, right? The things that actually do actions, right? What they are, how they work, and how you can use them to take action. I'll see you there.